Welcome, everyone, to the Songwriters on Process podcast. My name is Benno Papari, and on this podcast, I take a deep dive into the writing process behind some of the world's best songwriters. By way of background, I am a former English professor. I have a PhD in English language and literature, and I'm a writer myself. So this is a conversation about writing between two writers. My goal has always been to treat songwriters the same way that we treat prose writers, just as writers, plain and simple. So that's all we focus on. I don't care about tour stories, favorite bands, how bands get their name, favorite foods, anything like that. This is, again, a deep dive into the songwriting process with some of the world's best songwriters. And with that, let's get into today's episode. And today on the pod, it is Molly Hamilton of Widowspeak. Widowspeak is Molly Hamilton and her husband, Robert Earl Thomas. Their latest album, Roses, is out now. It is fantastic. I think I might consider myself an OG Widowspeak fan. I first saw them on their first tour. Must be 15 years ago, maybe now. Opening up for 254 at Larimer Lounge in Denver. And then I saw them a few years after that opening up for Woods here at the now closed Rock and Roll Hotel in DC. So I've been a fan of theirs for a long time, and I love this conversation. We talked about kind of a wide-ranging discussion about creativity. They are proud new parents of an infant, and certainly we discussed how being a new parent impacts them, not just the things they write about, but practically how it changes when and how they write with that baby in their lives. And also the role that outside influences have on their process as well. Up until recently, Molly worked at a restaurant, and Robert is a carpenter, woodworker, and how those things affect their creativity as well. The outside influences, if they get ideas while they were doing those things. And that's always a good discussion to have. And of course, we ended with a conversation about books. Molly is a voracious reader. Love to talk about that. So again, the new Widowspeak album is called Roses. It is fantastic. Take a listen. And here's my interview with Molly Hamilton of Widowspeak. I always start with a very simple question. And that is, do you think it's important to create in some fashion every day, no matter how difficult it might be to push through things? Or do you feel like forcing writing is more of a problem?
I definitely don't write every day. But that's not to say that I'm not thinking about songs every single day in kind of every act of my life, whether that is, at home or in the act of playing other music, listening to music, or even just when I'm at work. Up until like 3 days ago, was working at a restaurant part-time, just kind of in between tours and stuff. I always kind of go back to restaurant work. And that's a space where you're constantly hearing music in the background. And so I find it hard to not think about writing my own writing in the context of all the music I love and listen to, and even that my coworkers put on that I don't have a choice about. But I don't write every day. And I think that's mostly because I usually get to a point where I've kind of pent up some thoughts that I want to distill into a song. And sometimes it's through voice memos and actually singing things. And other times it's just little lyrical ideas that I have that I kind of want to put to music later when I have some time to kind of sit down and get in a singing space. Because for me, I'm not really a guitar virtuoso, and singing is more of an intimate kind of, I'm also not a trained singer, so it's always been just something that I do when I'm kind of working through thoughts. So it's not something where I have this dedicated practice. It is definitely coming out of a space of expression, but after some thought and time, I guess.
Do you deliberately not write? Some songwriters tell me that they will deliberately not write so that when they're ready to write, it just overflows.
I think so. I think that I like to kind of yeah, I guess, like, dam up, the kind of random all the things going through my head so that when you do release that, you have kind of a lot to work with and you're not editing as much, because you're kinda just letting things sort of edit themselves, because I do think something happens in my own mind, probably a lot of other songwriters' minds, where you kind of know, um it's not like your own brain is predictable, but you kind of know your own patterns, and so I find that sometimes if I just have a lot more to work with and a lot more little lyrical snippets kind of floating around, then I can piece them together, um, like, in the moment, and those are my best songs, I think, is when I sit down to write a song in 15 minutes instead of kinda trying to work on something over the course of 3 years, but then again, some of those songs, I'm really glad that I stuck with them and, saw them through or just kept those little lyrical ideas around in the notebooks for way longer than I should have, but
All right, so a couple follow-ups. Those songs that do happen in 15 minutes,
Mhm.
do you trust them completely and then not do a lot of editing to them?
Yeah, I think the ones that come together really fast, they just happen, and I love that, but you can't count on that, I don't think. For me, it happens usually when, um like, my favorite songs that have come quickly, um, maybe "Everything Is Simple" is one of them, which was on our last record, and it came because we had demoed all of the songs we were gonna record. We had been rehearsing with the band, and I sort of saw the record as this kind of fully realized thing we were about to record, and I sat down and had been kind of playing the finger picking part and just kind of singing a melody over it, and I just kind of wrote the lyrics really quickly, like, definitely in less than an hour, and I it was just, like, the perfect, like, capping off that group of songs, um, but I think that I needed to hear all the other songs in order to write the thing that felt like the last piece, and also that ended up being a single, but I also think that I couldn't have continued down that road just being like, "Okay, now I'm in the mindset of writing this type of song," because it was the only type of song that it needed to be, you know? Um, so, yeah, I think that, um, those quick songs, they just kind of flow out of you, and then you just kind of have to accept them as they are, like, because then you realize, like, any more kind of fine tuning and I guess I'll fine tune, like, 1 or 2 words just if there's, like, something that doesn't quite mesh well, but for the most part, it just feels like this random thing that happens that you have to just take at face value, in my opinion.
Y So the flip side to that, the songs that take forever, I think you alluded to this earlier. Do you doggedly see them through, or are there ideas I guess the longer it takes to write a song, it could be over, like, years. Does
Yeah.
that make you more determined? Because it's like, "Damn it, I wanna finish this," or, "Okay, there's a reason why this isn't happening. I'm gonna set this aside."
Well, so for me, I kind of employ all the different processes at once because I just kind of never know what process is gonna lead to something I like or that feels true or feels whether it's like an aesthetic, project or it's a lyrical one, like or it's a melody that I'm kind of workshopping. Like, there's different kinda avenues my brain kind of, um, follows in order to get to what I think is a good song. So I think that the long-term songs, they're an idea that I feel inspired by, but that I don't necessarily have the tools yet to use. So sometimes it's like, "Oh, I haven't quite figured out the lyrics to this melody that I love." And so it's just me singing the melody for, like, years on end, and just waiting until there's this moment where I think something goes with it. On the other hand, there's just little snippets of words I hang on to and sing over different parts all the time but they don't necessarily go with the other thing. Um, and then there's like the third group, which is the instantaneous songs where everything kind of shows up all at once. So there's songs like even in Widowspeak that we tried and then it didn't work out in the studio because we didn't quite happen upon the right feeling, or the lyrics didn't quite sit well with the band, like momentum and dynamics. So then we'll hang on to them and sometimes we try them again. Like there's a song Slow Dance on the jacket that was actually a Plum song that we cut from the record because it didn't quite feel right. And then uh, we recorded it for the jacket, and it was funny because I think it suffered a little bit from demo-itis, where I loved the demo of that song, and I was always kind of chasing this rough, kind of off the cuff thing that just happened when we were playing it without thinking it would be kept. So I think ultimately the final version on the jacket is a lot more unrefined, a little bit more just rock band in the room. Um, so it's funny how sometimes the musical component of it is something that needs to be a little bit less rehearsed or feel more organic, even though it took so long. So you're searching for the thing that you had at the beginning, but you have to go through the whole process to get there.
You mentioned the snippets too, and voice memos, and maybe a lyrical idea, a word here and there.
Mm.
How often do you mix and match and pull from different areas to form one song?
I would say it's probably 25 to 30% of the time I'm using these kind of like grab bags of things. And I think that's more because the band operates on an album kind of project style. Like we're not really song to song. And so for me, I see these as kind of bigger projects. So the songs become in service to a greater vision, which is still my own vision, but it's something I kind of work through as it goes along. So I kind of store away these things that start to feel like they speak to each other, like in the context of some other sort of uh vision. So the little songs come out of daily life, like um, those happen instantaneously and kind of periodically. And then there's all this other stuff that I'm like, this will be something. But um, sometimes it's just pieced together in the studio, I would say. Like some of it's the year before the record, I'm kind of writing a lot more than I had been, maybe the 2 years before that, but still not every day necessarily. Um, Working on songs over the course of a week, maybe that's maybe another 25 to 30% of the songs is like not right away and not randomly put together from parts, like excess parts. Uh, and then the ones that I am piecing together from the three different kind of components, like lyric, melody, and then playing together as a band and coming up with like a song that doesn't have maybe either of those things, like jamming together, singing top line, if you will. um, a lot of that comes out like when we're demoing and even in the studio. Like I'll just have my notebooks out and trying out lyrics because the songs change so much, like musically, when you're in the studio because you're forced to kind of commit them to a permanent state. And sometimes the flow for me really shifts depending on what the band dynamic is. So that means just like cutting a couple words here and there because you want to hold out a note, or um, sometimes the way that I sing being a little bit softer means that having less words allows me to kind of like take my breath and kind of like live in it a little more. So for me, the fact of how I sing necessarily changes how I write because I write to myself. I don't think I write songs in a vacuum that like everybody else would maybe make the same decisions. So I think it's also just knowing that there's certain notes I can't hit, or there's certain ones that certain a certain range that feels more effective for me. So in the studio, I kind of like workshop that singing over the band and then kind of fine tune the lyrics and the melody to be in a space that is the most true, most effective, most feels most honest with the lyrics and who I am, because sometimes I start making decisions. I'm like, I can't pull that off. This is not I'm writing someone else's song right now, which is cool, but that's just not exact purpose of these songs, I guess.
When you're in a rut, I'm not going to call it block. I think we all have that point. I mean, I'm not a songwriter, never written a song in my life, but as a prose writer, there's
Mhm.
certainly times that I feel like I've butt up against a wall. Like I'm up against a wall. I for whatever reason I just feel like I can't. I'm in that rut,
Yeah,
temporary rut. I just walk away. I don't stare at
yeah.
the screen. I don't find that to be helpful. So, what do you do if you're in those situations? Are there hacks or anything that you use to kind of break through that?
Mm. I mean, I think I walk away. I think I take time looking at any other thing but music, and even any other thing than poetry or lyrics. I think I can read other things, um, but I think I have to kind of go back to life to find my way back to writing. So sometimes that means weeks on end of just kind of going through the motions of walking around the city, buying groceries, making food, um, hanging out with the baby, as the case may be. Um, and I think then when I sit down with a guitar again or piano, which I've been doing recently, I will also say to jump off of that, like switching up my process is really helpful. And we have this little tiny piano. It's like 64 key little guy. And I'm not a piano player, but I find all of a sudden to be it's a lot more refreshing and inspiring to be writing on the piano because I don't know what I'm doing. I don't have these predictable kind of patterns with it. I know how to construct chords. I know basic theory, so I'm kind of working through it in a totally different way. Um, and I want to say that Brian Eno or somebody said something about approaching each new thing you do with a new tool. I don't know what the exact quote is, but I feel like somebody told me
I've
said
heard that a lot
yeah.
from
Um,
songwriters.
and I think there's definitely something to that, but at a certain point, I only really get inspired by the instrument when I have enough stuff in my head. So I think it really does come down to um, the life kind of accumulating something that I feel the need to express because I don't like nobody likes the feeling of I wish I had something to say, you know, but I have
Right.
nothing to say. And then it's not like you have to find the thing to say. It's just it will come to you from just living life and being out there. And, everyone has something to say. It's just that it's coming out of the unique things that happen to you, I think.
Right. And I agree because I would always tell my students writer's block happens not because we don't know what to say, but because we don't know where to begin. I don't think
Yeah.
that you're genuinely, staring at the screen or the page saying my mind is blank. And I always quote I interviewed the writer Anthony Doerr, who wrote All the Light We Cannot See about 10 years ago,
Mm.
Pulitzer Prize winning book. And I, I said, what do you think about writer's block? He said, I don't believe in writer's block. He said, writer's block is a failure of courage. And I've always stuck with me. It's like, don't be afraid to write. That's
Yeah.
why you have writer's block.
Yeah. I also feel like with the band, there's sometimes, there's 16 years of history and kind of um talking about ruts, but just kind of like the way we do things. And I do think um, every time we approach a new record, we kind of shift things just a little bit. And I think for any sort of writer, um, maybe you circle back on the core of what you do and who you are and how you create work and art and ideas. But I also think you do have to kind of shift out of that a little bit in order to grow and kind of challenge yourself and kind of try some new stuff. Um, so for that, like, it's also, um, I think I write different songs now because I have lived a longer life and I kind of have changed as a person. And so that's offering new perspectives just on it in and of itself. Like as life goes on, there's no way I could write songs like I did when I was 20, 22. Um, and I'm necessarily kind of thinking about time differently and relationships differently and all of that. So it kind of forces your hand a little bit. It's like I'm not even looking for it, but it just has necessarily offered new avenues and perspective and everything.
Well, being a parent, I
Mhm.
I mean, I think most writers, I'm certainly the same way. When you have kids, you're ironically more disciplined as a writer because you have less time. I mean,
Yeah.
if because quite frankly, when the baby's down for a nap, you got an hour. And,
Yeah.
I remember when we had kids that were taking naps, and although they're teenagers, of course they still take naps, but back when they had to take a nap, um, if I just had an hour of free time before kids, I probably wouldn't write. But when the baby's down for a nap, you only have an hour, so I always
Yeah.
got more done. So do you find that that's made you maybe more disciplined, even more productive, knowing that your time has to be more focused?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely take every hour, um, and understand its value, and also, it's not always an hour, they will wake up early. Sometimes you're blessed with an extra 15 minutes beyond what you thought was available. Uh, I also think it's shifted my ability to kind of wake up even earlier, like, even before the baby. I'm definitely more of a morning person, so sometimes she'll be sleeping a little bit later and I will wake up and have this like moment to myself to kind of think through things. Um, and also any moment where Rob has the baby and I'm off doing my own thing, like I definitely do kind of slip back into songwriting mode in terms of that, like writing a little thing on my phone or like writing something down in a notebook. Even just in those little kind of stolen moments from what I have. I have not gotten into the ability to work on anything at night because I'm just tired at the end of the day with a baby. It's just like that part has gotten very real. Like I even with band practices when they're happening at night and we have a babysitter, it's like, okay, I got to be done by like 9 p.m. because I'm just tired now. Um, I will say when she was born, we both were able to have paid parental leave for 3 months. And it was this really special like gift from the universe, well, from like, uh, what I think is essential policy, but like, in fact, expand that, because the baby was sleeping more than she would be later on. And so we did have this kind of really lovely, gentle summer of kind of still being able to work through musical ideas and kind of have this time with this new person who didn't know what was going on, I guess. Required a lot of work, but I guess the newborn phase I was thinking would be a lot more chaotic than it was because we were blessed with a baby who was not that, um, difficult, I guess. But I definitely was immediately kind of thinking about how that life change had happened, and there was this kind of time where we had a lot of anyway, there was a lot of musical writing happening, even though we didn't think we would have that. And then, of course, as soon as she was a little older, um, that time kind of melted away, and now she's starting to walk, and it's really hard to even have, a guitar around because she just wants to grab it and grab the strings. She's starting to, like, play the piano because she can reach up and, like, walk alongside it, so, uh it's great to share the music with her, like, as a concept that she can make sounds with things, but it's just not something where we can play music around her with it, being something that we're actually trying to result in anything useful, but
I see a children's album in your future, possibly, right?
oh, I mean, we've already I guess, written so many baby songs just from, like, singing things to her, like sleep songs, or just songs about doing random things around the house. I can see how, you never know what melodies are gonna resonate with the kid, because I always thought, like, "Oh, every child loves these Raffi songs," and then Peggy did respond to some of the Raffi songs for sure, but it's like song by song which ones she loves. And then we put on the Lemon Twigs album, Um, and she just, like, flipped out. She was like, "Yes!" And we're like, "Okay, the girl loves power pop." So now we're trying a lot more just, like, upbeat guitar music, not because we're trying to force her to listen to it, but because apparently that's what she likes, way more than Baby Beluga, so
I want to ask you. I had on Kevin Drew of Broken Social Scene about a month ago, and we were wondering whether East Coast versus West Coast, who's more productive because of the seasons. So his theory, he
Mhm.
wants to know how many disco albums were written in the winter because his theory is East Coast people, where you have more variability in weather, you write
Mhm.
more in the winter when you just less things to do. I never thought about that, but I'm curious if you ever find yourself to be more productive uh in certain seasons. I mean, again, his whole point was that when you're inside and it's cold, you just are going to write more. Have you ever thought about whether you're more productive in those times?
Well, counterpoint to the East Coast, West Coast, I'm from the Pacific Northwest, which is rainy 9 months out of the year, so it's indoor even more than it is cold. So I definitely felt like that was a part of how I kind of grew up and into songwriting, like, in my formative, years. I definitely think more artistically or creatively indoors. I think that um once summer starts and it's nice out, I'm out in the world, or I try to be staying out of the sun, but, like, you know, I get distracted by just leaves on the trees and everything. And I think, um, especially how cold the East Coast gets now that I've lived here for a while, that's forced on you even more. But I definitely feel like being in New York once it gets sunny, like, you don't really wanna be inside. Um, you don't really wanna be outside either, but I guess it just kind of it makes it difficult to, woodshed and kind of be alone in your thoughts because there's so much going on and there's, like, kind of a chaotic energy to the city in the summer. But I think, yeah, the coast argument is difficult too because California has, like, perma summer, but in the Northwest, it's like that summer is so beautiful that, the 9 months of rain kind of has both, I guess. But
How about I think you had mentioned this. You said pen and paper at some point, but are you, for the most part, when it comes to lyrics, a pen and paper person or a technology person?
I wish I wasn't a technology person, um, but I think the phone has made it easy for me to, um, just have it constantly on me. I do have notebooks, so many notebooks, but something about the way my brain works makes it impossible to use a notebook to the fullest. Uh, like, I don't, ever finish them. I have, like, maybe the first 20 pages with, like, a lot of dedication showing of, really trying to, like, keep things organized and kind of and then the other pages are just, like, random little scribbles, or I accidentally brought it to work and started writing about the menu during lineup or something, and then started taking orders in my notebook. And then, other times it's like I'm doodling little, uh, wood furniture ideas for Rob to make for the house, and it's like, okay, this notebook is just a catch-all of everything from this period of time, but it's definitely not a dedicated songwriting notebook. Whereas on my phone, I don't really write anything in the notes app except for songs. And I don't really do any voice memos except for songs. So for me, it's like I know that if I'm in the car for a little bit of time, sometimes I'll just open up the voice memo app and just kind of click on ones that I title as something significant and just kinda, like, see if anything was there. So I do kinda go through them periodically. And similarly, if I'm on the train, um, I don't really have any games or anything on my phone. Uh, I don't do anything but just kind of go back into there, um, if I have a moment and just kind of see if anything's there. So I'm constantly, like, cycling through the phone because we all have our phones all the time. And even in the van or something if we're traveling, it's just, like, a lot easier to type unfortunately, than it is to write in a moving vehicle. Um, so again, I'm, a little bit of a Luddite. I wish I did not rely on the technology, but I find that um, it is way easier for me to organize things that way than with a notebook. Um, Maybe because I feel like I respect the written uh, a book so much more that I have this fear of, like, ruining it, and then I just, like, don't finish them, and I do ruin them by just using them for orders and other things. Beautiful moleskins, just, like, a whole row of them that are absolutely not used, so
So I want to ask you, and I know Rob's not here, but I'm curious if you could speak for him on this because when we get ideas, like I'd love to know if you get ideas. You mentioned working in the restaurant, so I guess there's a couple parts here. One is, do you find that actually the sounds around you, the external sounds, might stimulate some kind of riff or melody or something, some repetitive song? I've heard people say things like they said the Bee Gees wrote Jive Talkin', I think, when they were going over a bridge and the bump, 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 bump. And I've
okay.
heard turn signals and external sounds. And I could see a restaurant where there's like repetitive sounds. So there's that for you. And again, I had on a couple years ago Dennison Whitmer, who's a songwriter, and he's also
Mhm.
a carpenter.
Yeah.
Um, and we talked about if when if he's getting song ideas when he's involved in carpentry, or is that more of a contemplative time where he doesn't? So there's a lot I just asked there, but I'd love to speak to that with those ideas come in those moments.
Well, I know for Rob, um, he does a lot of, like, fabrication and also some, like, fine woodworking for, like, homes and some, like, businesses, but doing, like, shelving and cabinets and stuff. So, like, there is the sound of wood and woodworking, but I think for him, even more than that, he has been listening to a lot of history podcasts when he works. He says it's this, like, time for him to just kind of, like, be thinking about, um, like, medieval times or, like, we joke about the whole, like, meme about the Roman Empire, but he's like, "There's just so much there." I mean, there's so
Oh no.
many, there's just a lot of kind of wild things to think about when you're digesting, ancient or even more recent history. So he's kind of treating it as like this ongoing like lecture series for him. So, but I think it's really inspiring him musically because I think he starts to think about just absolutely getting outside of the current moment and just thinking broad strokes about, um, oh, I hear the baby. Hang on one moment. I'll be right
Yeah.
back. Um, And then this is Peggy.
Amazing. All right. My first favorite. Hi, Peggy. Wow.
Peggy. So and then for me, I think that, you know, the hushed conversations or like loud conversations of a restaurant, depending on the time of day, and then all the clanging and all the moving around. I find a restaurant really inspiring. I even think listening to like loud, like we listen to all sorts of things. The restaurant I work at or was working at. Um, you know, rock playlists, a lot of disco, like Italian disco, and shoegaze and some folk. Like it's pretty much a mix of whatever who is working wants to put on. Um, and so I start to kind of get exposed to things that I'm familiar with, but in a different context. Um, and so I think it does make me think differently about what sort of sounds I want to use in a song. Yeah. Look, we're talking to somebody.
All right. Last question, because I don't want to keep you. Uh, Other artistic, I do find that songwriters are voracious readers. So I'd love to know what inspires you, what kind of literature inspires you, or who you like to read.
Hmm. Well, hang on. I'm gonna put her down really quick and then I'll
Yeah,
say
no problem.
reading. I'm looking at the bookshelf. Um, you know, I guess, like, my all-time favorite authors are maybe, uh I'm trying to think of in terms of, like, big big influences versus, like, the things that I pull from. I mean, I guess in a kind of obvious sense, um, the first thing I fell in love with was, like, Joan Didion, because I think that there's something about how nonfiction for me inspired songwriting because of a way of, like, processing both pop culture moments and also really intimate moments, and I think that the way that she kind of constructed sentences. Hi. And maybe I think some of it you kind of see borrowed from, like, Hemingway a little bit, like the kind of rhythmic repetition of lines. Like, I think she does that in a sort of, there's, like, a cadence to her prose. And so I think when I first started writing songs in high school, that was something that I immediately sort of, "Hey, baby." I immediately sort of clung to, and then I think that kind of opened up other, other nonfiction, like, creative nonfiction writers, but on the other hand, um, what else do I love? I mean, I will say Rob is maybe the one who kind of gets me into, um, specific, like, fiction writing because I think in recent years, kind of moved away from not, like, moved away from books, but I found myself kind of looking for, um, storytelling, like, kind of digging back into older things, I would say. Like, I was less abreast of, like, new fiction, and I think that's something where both of us have kind of been inspired by the past in a kind of nostalgic way recently, and so I find myself, like, reading Jane Austen or something and being like, there was something about this that felt so, almost like, um almost like, a warm fairy tale, cozy kind of story, even in all of its complexity for the time, but kind of reaching into these things that are almost, like, predictable, like, we all kind of know these things, and then, um I guess I'm inspired by things that feel comfortable, if that makes sense. Like, in the world today, I find myself looking for, um something that I can enjoy in a really basic sense, and then, like, for things like prose, I maybe, like, um, look for poetry in random places, if that makes sense. Like, I might get sent, like, a poem a friend likes or something, and then it's less, like, obvious how I find myself ingesting written media these days, if that makes sense. And again, reading is a little harder with a baby, but, um, yeah.
All right, quick follow up. You're reading a book and you're not feeling it. Do you have to finish it or can you set it aside and never pick it up again?
I have only not finished maybe 1 or 2 books in my life. I was a, like, voracious reader as a child, and I think I do have that feeling that I have to finish things. Um, it's again, it's funny, like, I will always have a book at the airport, and sometimes it's, the airport beach read, whatever, and some of those are not always the best, but I will still read them, and then come out of it maybe having learned nothing about myself or my place in the world, but, um, yeah, I think that I have to finish it. I just have to see through to the end what the writer was thinking, um, and just the end of a story. I mean, and at the end of it, I believe in storytelling, I wanna hear how the story ends, um, so it's not it's not just the content of it, it's like the whole arc.
And that's it for the latest episode of Songwriters on Process. You can find all of the old episodes on all major streaming platforms and probably some minor ones as well. You can also find them on the Songwriters on Process website. I started the site back in 2011, so that means there are hundreds upon hundreds of interviews with some of the world's best songwriters. So take a deep dive into some of those episodes. They are all great. Of course, I'm biased. Also, shameless plug. My book, Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir by Mark Morton with Benno Papari, that is me, is out now on Hachette Books and in all major bookstores. Mark is a good friend of mine. He is the guitarist in the metal band Lamb of God. And so we collaborated on his memoir. I'm biased, but that's a damn good book. Again, it is called Desolation, a Heavy Metal Memoir. And lastly, if you want to get in touch, go to the Songwriters on Process website. You can fill out a handy contact form and it'll get to me that way. You can also email me at ben@songwritersonprocess.com. I'm all ears. Send me your comments, your suggestions, your complaints, people you want me to interview. I get great suggestions all the time. I can't respond to all of the emails because I get a lot of them, but I do read all of them. And let me know your thoughts. If you have ideas for people you want me to interview, there's your chance. And with that, I am out. See you next time.